Hi, I'm Ali Hussain, creator of Entmorph, and in this video we're going to take the component we created in the previous video, which looks like this, and add styling to it using the Entmorph component styles editor to make it look like this. So let's begin. I'll go back to the first project and click on Go To and Code to take us up to the component editor. A component can define its own styles using the built-in styles editor. This isn't included by default, so we need to add it. To do that, we first have to open the component editor for editing, like this, which makes the component commands visible. I'll click on Add Section and Styles, and this adds a styles editor to the component editor. It has two subsections, locals, which we'll look at a little later, and rules, which is where we'll be creating our CSS rules. The rules editor has a CSS rules commands panel at the very top, and underneath is the outline section, which gives us a bird's eye view of all of the selectors for the rules we create. We'll keep coming back to this as we add more rules. If I scroll down, there's a default style rule which is added. It has a style rule commands panel at the top, then a selector editor, and then at the very bottom is a declaration block, which is where we'll add our properties. So I'll start by renaming the selector to .main, press enter, and then let's add some rules. So I'll open the declaration block and begin by clicking on the default property and give it the name of border. Press enter. Whenever we add a property, its value is an empty string by default. So if I click on it, it opens a string editor. And if I click on the string editor heading, it opens a CSS property value dropdown, which provides dedicated editors for various properties. For example, for creating lengths, box shadows, transforms, colors, and so on. We'll explore a couple of these in this video, but we'll mostly stick to strings, as I want to show you more fundamental aspects of the styles editor. So I'll just click cancel, and for the border, I'll enter 1px solid hash AAA and press enter. Notice that as I add properties, the preview panel underneath updates to show you how an element will look when this style rule is applied to it. I'll scroll back up, click on add entry, and add some more properties. So we'll add a font family of Verdana. Then we'll also add padding. Press enter. One thing to point out is I'm going to be pressing the tab key on my keyboard to move between the property editor and the value editor quite a lot in this video. So I'm going to do that now. And you'll notice that there's a highlight around the value editor to show that I've done this. And I'll be pressing enter instead of clicking on the editor with the mouse. So I'll do that now. And that opens the value editor for padding. And I'll just enter 1.5 EM. Press enter. Next I'll add a border radius. And I'll open its value and enter 10 pixels. Press enter. And let's add one last property. Click on add entry, type box shadow, press enter. And this time I'm going to change from the string editor to a box shadow editor from the CSS property value dropdown. And this opens a dedicated editor for the box shadow property. So I'm going to accept most of the defaults and I'll just update the blur, reduce it a little and do the same with the spread. And finally, I'll open the color editor here. And this has a dedicated color editor inside the box shadow editor. So I'll just adjust the lightness, just make it a little lighter, and that should be good enough. And I'll close the box shadow editor. So that's all the properties for our main style rule. I'll just scroll back up, close the editor, and collapse the declaration block. Now let's go down to the render section and add this class to an element. So I'll just scroll down So we're going to apply this to the root div element. I'll show you two different ways to add a class to an element, and in the next video we'll look at another way using state variables. So the first way is the more traditional way, which involves adding a class attribute. We'll open the root div element for editing, scroll down to the HTML element commands, and click on Add Attributes, which adds an empty attributes map editor. I'll scroll down, and from the commands, I'll click on Add to actually add the new attribute. Give it a name of class, press Enter, and for its value, I'll give it the name of our style rule, which is main, and press Enter. Now let's preview the component. So I'll just go back up to the Go To menu, go to the Output section, and press Preview Component. And you'll notice that a border with a light box shadow and some padding has appeared around the component. So this is method 1. Now let's go back up, and I'll show you method 2. So I'm going to start by removing the class attribute. And the easiest way to do that is just to click on Remove Attributes to remove all the attributes. Then I'll close the editor, and instead I'm going to open the div element tag, and at the very end I'm going to type .main, the name of our style rule, and press Enter. This is a shortcut which is very useful when you have static classes that never need to be added or removed, and you can add as many CSS class names after the element tag as you want. So now let's go down to the output section, click on Preview Component again, and nothing has changed, which is a good thing in this case, because it means that adding .main to the end of the div tag has the same effect as adding a class attribute of main. So this is method 2 for adding classes to elements. Next, let's style the table. I'll click on Go To, Code, and go to Styles to take us to the Styles editor. So if I click on Add in the CSS Rules commands, it opens a submenu which has an Add Style Rule command which I can use to add a new style rule. However, if I close this and scroll down to the style rule instead, if you look at the style rule commands, you'll notice there's an Add Child Rules button. If I click on this, it adds a child rules section to our .main style rule. This lets us add nested style rules within the parent rule. So let's add a table rule here. I'll click on Add Style Rule, which adds the rule under the .main style rule, and I'll rename the selector to Table and press Enter. And let's just scroll up to the very top and see what we've done. So let's just go to the outline. And now you'll see that the outline shows two selectors, .main, and underneath that, nested, is Table. So adding Table under .main will generate a style rule which has a selector of .main space Table. So let's scroll back down to the Table style rule and add some properties to it. I'll open the declaration block and add the following properties. So we'll begin with a background, #EEE, and since it's a table, we'll give it some border spacing, and give it the value of 0, top and bottom, and 1.2 EM left and right, and press Enter. Next, I'll give it a border radius, and give it a value this time of 30 pixels. Press Enter. Add another entry, give the table some padding, 0.2 EM top and bottom, 1.2 EM left and right, and finally, last property, give it a margin right of 1 EM, in case we want to place anything to the right of the table, which we will, and press Enter. So let's scroll back up to the declaration block. I'll close it and collapse it because we're done with it. And now let's preview the component. Click on Go To, Output, click on Preview. So now our table has a grey rounded background. Next, let's style the rows. So I'll click on the back arrow to take us back to the table style rule, and we can add some child rules to the table. Click on Add Child Rules, add a style rule, and change its selector to TD. Press Enter. So this will create a style rule with a selector of .main space table space TD. Let's add some properties which will apply to all TD elements or all cells within the table. So I'll open the declaration block, scroll down, give all the cells a background. I'll give them all padding first of 0.6 EM, 1 EM left and right, and a background. Add an entry, select background. And this time, instead of using the string editor, I'm going to use one of the color editors. So I'll click on string and select color. And this creates a color editor, which we saw earlier when we looked at the box shadow. So let's try and find a green. I'll move it to somewhere on the border of yellow and green here. Make it a little more saturated and a little lighter. I think this is the green we're after. So I'll close the editor and scroll up. And I'll close the declaration block. So this rule will apply to all cells within the table. But we also want to be able to style the first and last cells. So to do that, we'll click on Child Rules again. And this time, instead of clicking on Add Style Rule, I'm going to click on Add Pseudo-class. And this opens a submenu which lets us add pseudo-classes to the parent style. So for the first cell of every table, I'm going to select First Child. And this adds a pseudo-selector of :first child. Notice that the selector has an ampersand prefix. This is a special code introduced by the Sass CSS framework, and it means that the generated selector will have the form td:first class. So the style rule will apply to the first cell of each table row or TR element. You can also see that the parent selector checkbox is checked to indicate this. If we were to uncheck it, the ampersand disappears, and that means that the generated selector will have the form td space :first class, which isn't what we want. So I'll click on parent selector again and close the selector editor. So now let's add some properties for the first cell of every row. Open the declaration block and begin by adding radii to the left-hand side. So I'll start with top left radius, scroll up, scroll down a little, give it a value of 30 pixels. Then we'll do the same thing with the bottom radius, bottom left radius, also 30 pixels. Now we can give it a background. What I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll back up to the parent TD cell, open its declaration block, click on the clipboard, select the background entry and copy it by pressing the copy entry command under the clipboard. Now we can close this again and collapse it. Now we'll go back down to our first child style rule, click on the clipboard, paste child, and paste it at the end. You can see our background property has been pasted. So now we'll edit this, and all I'm going to do is to make it a little darker, to make the first cell darker than the rest, make it stand out. So that looks like a good color. And we'll close the editor. And now add two more properties. Firstly, we'll add a color. Just go back to the edit menu. Add a color of white and align the text to the right by adding a text align property. Add entry, text align, scroll down to see it better and press enter. And now we can close the style rule for the first child and collapse it. I close the whole rule. And next we want to style the last cell of every row by giving it a rounded radius. So again, we'll go up to the pseudo-class submenu and add a last child pseudo-class. And again, it has the parent selector selected, which is what we want. So we'll close the selector and add a couple of properties. So we'll open the declaration block, scroll down, and we'll just give it a top right radius of 30 pixels, and the same with the bottom right radius, also 30 pixels, and press enter. So now let's scroll up a little, close our editors, and go to the output section to preview the latest component. Click on preview. And now we have a much nicer looking table with rounded green rows. So next, let's add some styling to the input number box. I'll just click on the back arrow, collapse the last child, collapse the first child as well, and from the child rules of the TD element, I'll add a style rule. This time for the selector, I'll rename it to input, type equals number, and press enter. And this will select all input elements which have a type attribute of number. We'll add some properties to it. First, we'll give it some padding, 0.6 EM. Let's scroll down. And a border. One pix, solid, green. And finally, a border radius. Add entry. This time, 5 pixels. Press enter. Now we also want to highlight the number element when a user focuses on it. So I'll scroll back up, close its declaration block, and add child rules again. Add a pseudo-class, and select focus. And close the selector, and we'll just add 2 properties. Open the declaration block. First property, we'll give it a background. Scroll down. Open the value editor, and I'll change it this time from string to browser color. And I'll click on the color. And this opens your browser's default color selector. So I'll just click on yellow and just make it a little lighter and press OK. And now let's add one more property. Add an outline of 2 pixels, solid and green, just to highlight it a little better, and press enter. Now let's scroll back up, close everything, and preview all the latest changes. Click on Go To, Output, Preview Component. So now our input number elements have been styled, and if I click on any number box to focus on it, the box has a yellow background with a thick green outline. Now we're done with the table, so let's add styling to the SVG element and circle. Click on Go To, Code, and go to the Styles editor. And now we can also see that our outline has been filled out quite nicely with all of the different styles we've been adding. Since the SVG element is a child of the main div element, we can add the SVG rule as a child rule within the .main style rule. So I'll just go to the main element. I can in fact click on it from the outline. And this takes us to the .main style rule. I'll just go to its child rules and collapse everything. I'll also close the table style rule. And underneath the table, we'll add another style rule. So I'll click Add Style Rule and rename it to SVG and press Enter and give it some properties. So I'll open the declaration block and begin by giving it a border. Oops, scroll down, 1 pixel, solid, green, and a box shadow, a very light one. And this time I'm just going to use a string, 0, 0, 10 pixels, 0, hash DTD, press enter. And scroll back up and close the declaration block. Then under the SVG style rule, I'm going to click on Add Child Rules, add a style rule, and rename it to circle, so we can style our circle element. And for the properties, I'll open the declaration block, scroll down, and begin by giving it a fill, because it's an SVG element, so it has different style names to normal elements. And I'll change its value. Again, I'll select string and use the browser color, open that up. I'll select this orange and make it quite light, so we have a peachy color for the background. And finally, I'll give it a stroke color. Again, I'll use the browser color and select the same orange but make it a little darker. Press OK. So let's scroll back up, close everything we've added. Let's just preview the outline again. And we've just added an SVG selector under the .main selector, and within that we've added a circle element selector. So let's preview everything. Click on Go To, Output, and press Preview Component. Scroll down. So now our SVG element and circle are looking a lot nicer. We're almost where we want to be. We just need to align the table and the SVG element. So I'll click on Back and go down to the main rule. And from its child rules, I'll add a style rule. And I'll give it a selector greater than asterisk and press OK, press Enter. And this means apply this rule to all immediate children of .main elements. In other words, to the table and SVG elements. So I'll add the following property. Just open it up, give it a display, press Enter, inline block, and press Enter. And let's just preview this. Click on Go To, Output, Preview Component. Well, that's definitely improvement. It's put the table and SVG element side by side next to each other, but what we really wanted was for the table to be at the top. So I'm going to make one last change. I'll click on the back arrow and go down to the declaration block and add one last property. Add entry, type vertical align, and set its value to top. And let's just go back up to the very top. Let's close everything now. Go to Output, and preview it. And now we've completed all the styling changes to the component we started off with. So now suppose we want to change both the table and row radii from 30 pixels to 20 pixels. The way we've defined our styles, we would have to change them in 5 places. Once for the table, and once for each individual border radius for the row. If we know that we always want these to be the same, we should be able to set a variable instead. So let's click on Go To, Code, and go to Styles. And that's what the local subsection of the Styles editor is for. It lets us add local variables, which we can then reference from our rules section. So I'll open the locals editor and add a local variable. Click on Add and name it row radius and press Enter. And now I'll give it a value. And clicking on the value opens a CSS property value dropdown, meaning that we can create variables which we can then use as the value of any CSS property. I'm just going to select string, and for the value I'll give it 20 pixels and press Enter. Now we need to replace all border radii properties, which are currently set to 30 pixels, with the row radius variable we just created. So we'll just go to the outline, and I know that they're in table, first child and last child. So I'll start by clicking on table, and I'll open its declaration block and click on the border radius property value. Then I'll change it from string, scroll down, and I'm going to use this new option we haven't looked at yet, select locals ID. And click on that. It gives us a drop down which has our row radius variable in it. And I'll just click on that. And now let's do the same with the first child and last child. I'll just go back, click on first child, open its declaration block, and replace each border radius property value with row radius. So I'll click on 30 pixels, click on string, select locals ID, row radius, and do the same. And last child is just underneath, so I'll just scroll down, open that up, and do the same for last child. Click on string, select locals ID, select row radius, click on 30 pixels, string, select locals ID, and row radius. And now let's preview our updated component. So I'll just scroll up, close as much as possible, click on Go To, and Output, and preview the component. And you can see that the border radius of both the table and of all its rows have been updated from 30 pixels to 20 pixels. Whenever you have the same property values repeated across different rules, it's a really good idea to create variables in the local section of the styles editor, which you can then reference from within those rules. One more thing I want to show you is when the component is built, any CSS rules you create in the styles editor should only apply to that component. So any CSS classes which you create in the styles editor are renamed to make them unique to that component. And here's an example of how it looks. I'll just scroll down. I'm going to right click on the top right, top left of the component. And this opens a Firefox dropdown. And I'll scroll down to Inspect and click on it. And this opens the developer tools for my browser. So we can see on the right-hand side in the element panel that the div element has a class of main underscore and a string of alphanumeric characters. If we look at the style rule which has been created, it also has the same class name. So this makes the .main class unique to our SVG circle component. And what this means is that you can have two components with a class name of .main and you never have to worry about those styles clashing. So we've covered the basics of using the Entmorph styles editor for creating and applying style rules to elements. In the next video, we'll look at how to create CSS animations using keyframes rules and how to dynamically add CSS classes to elements using state variables. To start using Entmorph now, you can create a free account by going to entmorph.com, clicking on Sign Up and submitting your details. You can access more videos on the Entmorph YouTube channel, youtube.com/@entmorph. Please share this video with anyone you think will benefit from using Entmorph. Thanks a lot for watching.